I think this is live. All right, it says I'm live. Yeah, it says I'm 7 seconds in, so we're probably good. All right, I just want to say something, and it means nothing, but I absolutely hate taking the cover photos, the thumbnail photos for these things. I want to make more of these for you in the future, but I am going to have to find a reasonable way to just upload the same cover photo for all of them. Find some cute picture of all my baby photos. I might find a baby photo of me for the remainder of these cover photos that my mom sent me and just upload them as the cover photo because I hate taking these cover photos. I was completely off track and random. It means nothing to this. But it does add character to these if I rant about something. Because they're not all the same that way. Yeah. But yeah, I think this might be the last one for the night. I don't know if I'm getting tired, is the right way to put it. I'm wide awake for some reason. It's not really even anything in my head. I'm just awake. I don't know why. I think somehow, because we took a nap this morning. We stayed up all night for way too long so I could be on your schedule. And then we took a nap. And then we slept, and then we woke up, and then we took an hour nap. And somehow, ever since that hour nap, I have just been wide awake. Could not fall asleep for the life of me. So I'll probably try to sleep after this, try to force myself to sleep. And hopefully you do call and wake me, because I did ask you to, but I'm skeptical, because I don't trust you wanting to wake me up, because you never want to wake me. Just like I don't want to wake you by calling you back so I can see you while I go to sleep. Anyways, I love you. I hope you're having a good day or night's sleep. And I will start reading this again. Where the Red Fern Grows, Chapter 8. It seems that the worries and wants of a young boy never cease. Now that I had my pup son, another obstacle had cropped up. This one looked absolutely impossible. I had to have a coonskin so I could train them. With my 3 little traps and a bulldog determination, I set out to trap Mr. Ringtail. For 3 solid weeks, I practically lived on the river. I tried every trick I knew. It was no use. I just couldn't catch the wily old coons. In desperation, I went to my grandfather. He smiled as he listened to my tale of woe. Well, we'll have to do something about that, he said. To train those dogs right, you'll need that coon hide, that's for sure. Now you watch the store while I go over to my tool shed. I'll be right back. Sorry. Throat stuff. After what seemed like an eternity, I saw him coming. He was carrying a brace and bit. That was all. With a mischievous little smile on his face, he said, "You wouldn't think a fellow could catch a coon with this brace and bit, would you?" I thought he was kidding me, and it made me feel bad. "Why, Grandpa?" I said, "You couldn't catch a coon in a jillion years with that thing. You just don't have any idea how smart they are." "Yes, you can," he said. "You bet your boots I can. Why, when I was a boy, I caught coons on top of coons with one of these things." I saw Grandpa was serious, and I got interested. I laid the brace down on the counter, picked up a small paper sack, and filled it about half full of. Oh, I lost my track. Filled about half full of horseshoe nails. "Now you do everything exactly as I tell you," he said, "and you'll catch that coon." "Yes, sir, Grandpa," I said. I will. I'll do anything to catch one of them." Oh, shoot. I'm messing this chapter up so terribly. "Now, the first thing you'll need is some bright objects," he said. "The best thing is a bright shiny tin. Cut out some little round pieces, a little smaller than this bit. Do you understand?" I nodded my head. "Now," I said, "you go down along the river where there are a lot of coon tracks. Find a good solid log close by and bore a hole down about 6 inches. Drop one of the bright pieces of tin down in the hole, and be sure it's laying right on the bottom." I was all ears. I didn't want to miss one word my grandfather said. Now and then I would glance at him to see if he was kidding me. In a serious voice, he went on talking. "Now pay close attention," he said, "because this is the main part of the trap." With eyes as big as hoot owls, I looked and listened. He took 4 of the horseshoe nails from the sack. With the thumb and forefingers of his left hand, he made a small O about the size of the bit, which was an inch and a half in diameter. Now we'll say this is the hole you bored in the lock, he said. About an inch apart, drive these nails in, on a slant opposite each other. Holding one of the nails in his right hand, he showed me the right angle. The ends of the nails will enter the hole about halfway between the top and piece of tin, he continued. Leave an opening between the sharp points big enough for a coon to get his paw through. He asked me if I understood. Again, I nodded my head and moved a little closer to him. How is that going to catch a coon, Grandpa? I asked. It'll catch him all right, he said, and it won't fail. You see, a coon is a curious little animal. Anything that is bright and shiny attracts him. He will reach in and pick it up. When his paw closes on the bright object, it balls up. And when he starts to pull it from the hole, the sharp ends of the nails will gouge into his paw and he's caught. He looked over at me. Well, what do you think of it? He asked. I closed my eyes and in my mind I could see the funnel-like entrance of the hole and the sharp slanting points of the nails. I could see the coon reaching in for the shiny piece of metal. Naturally, his paw would be much larger when closed than it was when he reached in. It would be impossible for it to pass the sharp nails. It was all looking pretty good to me, and I was on the point of saying so when it hit me. What all the coon had to do was open his paw, drop the object, and he was free. It all blew up then and there. I just knew my grandfather was playing a joke on me. I stepped back and almost cried as I said, Grandpa, you're kidding me. That kind of a trap couldn't catch a coon. Why, all he'd have to do is open his paw, drop the piece of tin, and he could pull it up from the hole. Grandpa started roaring with laughter. This did make me feel bad. With tears in my eyes, I started for the door. Wait a minute, Grandpa said. I'm not kidding you. Oh, I know I like to have my jokes, same as any man, but I meant every word I said. I turned around and looked at him. He had stopped laughing, and there was a hurt expression on his face. I wasn't laughing at you, he said. I was laughing more at myself than you. I just wanted to see if you were smart enough to see that there was a way that the coon could free himself. A fellow wouldn't have to be very smart to see that, I said. Grandpa started talking seriously again. You know, he said, a coon has more than one peculiarity about him. When I was a boy, I had a pet coon. By watching him, I saw and learned a lot of things. He had a den in an old hollow tree in front of our yard. I don't know the number of times I'd have to climb that tree and get my mother's scissors, buttons, needles, and thimble from his den. Or I'd even carry out our knives, forks, and spoons. Anything that was bright and shiny he took to his den. Grandpa stopped talking for a few minutes. I could see a faraway look in his eyes. Once again, he was living in those long ago days. I waited in silence for him to go with his story. One of the most peculiar things about that coon, he said, was his front feet. Once he wrapped those little paws around something he would never let go. My mother had an old churn. It was one of those kind with a small hole in the lid for the dasher. When she would get through churning, she would take the dasher out to wash it. That crazy coon would climb up on top of the churn, poke his little front paw through the hole, and get a fistful of butter. The hole was small, and when he closed his paw, he couldn't get it back out. All he had to do was to open it, drop the butter, and he would be free. But do you think he would? No, sir. He would carry that churn lid all over the house, squalling and growling, while I took everyone in the house to free him. I'd have to wrap him up in a gunny sack or an old coat and pry his claws loose from around the butter. Seeing this time after time, it was what gave me the idea for this trap. Once he reaches in and gets hold of that tin, he's caught, because he will never open his paw. With my confidence restored, it all sounded pretty good to me. I was anxious to try out this wonderful plan. I thanked him, and taking the brace and nails, I left the store. By the time I reached home, it was too late in the day to start making my traps. That night, I talked the idea over with Papa. I've heard of coons being caught that way, he said, but I never paid much attention to it. Your grandfather should know, though, for he was quite a coon hunter when he was a boy. From what he told me, I said, it never fails. Papa asked if I wanted him to help make my traps. No, I said, I think I can do it myself. I didn't sleep too well that night. I bored holes, drove nails, and fought coons practically all night. Early the next morning, I went to the trash pile. As I stood around in the rusty old cans, I thought of another time I had searched for a can. Finally, I found the one I wanted. It was bright and shiny. Everything was going along just fine until Mama caught me cutting out the circles of tin with her scissors. I always swore she could find the biggest switches of any woman in the Ozarks. That time she overdid it. I was almost to the river before the stinging stopped. It wasn't hard to find places for my traps. All along the river, large sycamore logs lay partly submerged in the clear blue water. On one where I could see the muddy little tracks of the ringtails, I bored a hole, dropped in a piece of tin, and drove my nails. On down the river I went, making my traps. I stopped when I ran out of nails. Altogether, I had 14 traps. That night, Papa asked me how I was making out. Oh, all right, I said. I've got 14 of them made. He laughed and said, well, you can't ever tell. You may catch one. The next morning, I was up with the chickens. Took my pups with me as I just knew I'd have a big green-tail trap and wanted to see it. I was a disappointed boy when I peeked out of a canebrake at my last trap and didn't see a coon. All the way home, I tried to figure out what I had done wrong. I went to Papa, put his thinking cap on, and thought the situation over. Maybe you left too much scent around when you made those traps, he said. If you did, it'll take a while for it to go away. Now, I wouldn't get too impatient. I'm pretty sure you'll catch one sooner or later. Papa's words perked me up just like air does a deflated inner tube. He was right. I had simply left too much scent around my traps. All I had to do was wait until it disappeared and I'd have my coon hide. Morning after morning, it was the same old disappointment. No coon. When a week had gone by and no results from my traps, I gave up. What little patience I had was completely gone. I was firmly convinced that coons didn't walk on sycamore logs anymore, and bright shiny objects had about as much effect on them as a coonhound would. One morning I didn't get up to round my trap line. I stayed in bed. What was the use? It was just a waste of time. When the family finally sat down to breakfast, I heard my oldest sister say, Mama, isn't Billy going to get up for breakfast? Why is he in his room? Mama asked. I didn't know. I thought he was down looking at his traps. I heard Papa say, I'll go wake him up. He came to the door and said, You better get up, Billy. Breakfast is ready. I don't want any breakfast, I said. I'm not hungry. Papa took one look at me and saw I had a bad case of the ringtail blues. He came over and sat down on the bed. What's the matter, he asked. You having coon trouble? Grandpa lied to me, Papa. I said, I should have known better. Who ever heard of anyone catching a coon with a brace and a bit, and a few horseshoe nails? I wouldn't say that, Papa said. I don't think your grandpa deliberately lied to you. Besides, I've heard of coons being caught that way. Well, I don't think I've done anything wrong, I said. I've done everything exactly as he said, and I haven't caught a single one. I still think it's that scent, Papa said. You know, someone told me, or I read it somewhere, that it takes about a week for a scent to die away. How long has it been since you made those traps? It's been over a week, I said. Well, the way I figure, it's about time for you to catch one. Yes, sir, I wouldn't be surprised if you came in with one any day now. After Papa had left the room, I lay thinking of what he had said. Any day now. I got up and hurried into my clothes. As soon as I was finished with breakfast, I called my pups and lit out for the river. The first trap was empty. So was the second one. That old feeling of doubt came over me again. I thought, it's no use. I'll never catch one, so I need to skin. And I so need the skin to train my pups. On the way to my third trap, I had to walk through a thick stand of wild cane. It was tough going and my pups started whimpering. I stopped and picked them up. We'll be out of this in a few minutes, I said, and then you'll be all right. I came plowing out of the matted mess and was right on the trap before I realized it. I was met by a loud squall. I was so surprised I dropped the pups. There he was, my first coon. He was humped up on the sycamore log, growling and showing his teeth. He kept jerking his front paw, which was jammed deep in the hole I had bored. He was trapped by his own curiosity. I couldn't move, and I felt like my wind had been cut off. I kept hearing a noise but couldn't make out what it was. The movement of the boy pup shook me from my trance. The unidentified sound was his bawling. He was trying to climb up on the log and get to the coon. I yelled at him and darted in to get a hold of his collar. On seeing my movement, the coon let out another squall. It scared me half to death. I froze in my tracks and started yelling again at my pup. The girl pup worked around behind the coon and climbed up on the log. I screamed at her. She paid no attention to me. Digging his sharp little claws in the bark, the boy pup made it to the top. He didn't hesitate. Straight down the sycamore log he charged. With teeth bared, the coon waited. When my pup was about 2 feet from him, he made a lunge. The coon just seemed to pull my pup up under his stomach and went to work with tooth and claw. The girl pup saved him. Like a cat in a corn crib, she sneaked in from behind and sank her needle-sharp teeth in the coon's back. It was too much for old Rainey. He turned the boy pup loose, turned around, and slapped her clear off the log. She came running to me, yelping her head off. I grabbed her up in my arms and looked for the boy pup. When the coon had turned him loose, he too had fallen off the log. He was trying to get back to the coon. I darted in and grabbed him by the hind leg. With the pup under each arm and running as fast as I could, I lit out for the house. Coming out of the bottoms into a fresh plowed field, I set my pups down so I could get a little more speed. I started yelling as soon as I came in sight of the house. Mama came flying out with my sisters right behind her. Papa was out by the barn harnessing his team. Mama yelled something to him about a snake. He dropped the harness, jumped over the rail fence, and in a long rope started for me. Mama reached me first. She grabbed me and shouted, "Where did it bite you?" "Bite me," I said. "Why, Mama, I'm not bit." "I've got him, Mama. I've got him." "Got what?" Mama asked. "A big coon," I said. "The biggest one in the river bottoms. He's this big, Mama." I made a circle with my arms as big as a 20-gallon keg. Mama just groaned way down deep and covered her face with her hands. Some big tears squeezed out between her fingers. Almost in a whisper, I heard her say, "Thank God. I thought you were snake bitten." My sisters, seeing Mama crying, puckered up and started bawling. "He needs a whipping," the oldest one said. "That's what he needs. Scaring Mama that way." Something busted loose inside me, and I cried a little too. "I didn't mean to scare Mama," I sniffed. "I just wanted everyone to know I caught a coon." Up until this time, Papa hadn't said a word. He just stood looking on. "Here now," he said. "Let's have none of this crying. You didn't mean to scare anyone." Taking his handkerchief from his pocket, he stepped over to Mama, put his arm around her, and started drying her eyes. Mama poked her head around him and glared at me. "Billy Coleman," she shouted. "If you ever scare me like that again, I'll take a switch and wear you to a frazzle." This hurt my feelings, and I really did get tuned up. "Everyone's mad at me," I said, "and I haven't done anything but catch the biggest coon on the river." Mama came over. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to be cross, but you did scare me. I thought a rattlesnake had bitten you." "Now that's all settled," Papa said. "We had better get to that coon." Looking at Mama, he said, "Why don't you and the girls go with us? I don't think it'll take long." Mama looked at me, smiled, and turned to the girls. "Would you like to go?" she asked. The only answer was a lot of squealing and jumping up and down. On the way, Mama noticed some blood on my shirt. She stopped me and started looking me over. "Where did that come from?" she asked. "Did that coon bite you?" "No, Mama," I said. "I didn't get close enough for him to bite me." With a worried look on her face, she jerked out my shirt. "You don't seem to be scratched anywhere," she said. "Maybe this is where it came from," Papa said. He reached down and picked up my pup. His little black nose was split wide open and was bleeding. I saw a relieved look come over Mama's face. Looking at me, she started shaking her head. "I don't know," she said. "I just don't know." "Did that coon get a hold of this pup?" Papa asked. "He sure did, Papa," I said. "But it wasn't the coon's fault. If it hadn't been for little Ann, he'd have eaten him up." I told how my dogs had tied into the coon. Papa laughed as he fondled my pup. "This dog is going to be a coonhound," he said. "And I mean a good one." The coon started squalling as soon as we came in sight. "My goodness," Mama said. "You wouldn't think anything small would be so vicious." Papa picked up a club. "Now everybody stand back out of the way," he said. "This won't take long." My pups were wanting to get to the coon so badly that they were hard to hold. I had to squeeze them up tight to keep them from jumping right out of my arms. My sisters, with eyes as big as blue marbles, got behind Mama and peeked around her. Papa whacked the coon a good one across the head. He let out a loud squall, growled, and showed his teeth. He tried hard to get to Papa, but the trap held him. The girls buried their faces in Mama's dress and started bawling. Mama turned her back on the fight. I heard her say, "I wish we hadn't come. Poor thing." Papa whacked him again and was all over. It was too much for Mama and the girls. They left. I heard the tall cane rattling as they ran for the house. After the coon was killed, I walked over. Papa was trying to get the coon's paw from the trap. He couldn't do it. Taking a pair of pliers from his pocket, he said, "It's a good thing I had these along, or we would have had to cut his foot off." After Papa had pulled the nails, he lifted the coon's paw from the hole. There, clamped firmly in it, was the bright piece of tin. In a low voice, Papa said, "Well, I'll be darned." All he had to do was open it, and he was free. But he wouldn't do it. Your grandfather was right. A sorrowful look came over Papa's face as he ran his fingers through the soft, yellow hair. "Billy," he said, "I want you to take a hammer and pull the nails from every one of those traps. It's summertime now, and their fur isn't any good. Besides, I don't think this is very sportsmanlike. The coon doesn't have a chance. It's all right this time you needed this one, but from now on I want you to catch them with your dogs. That way they have a 50-50 chance." "I will, Papa," he said. That's what I intended to do. While we were skinning the coon, Papa asked me when I was going to start training my dogs. "I don't know," I said. "Do you think they're too young?" "No, I don't think so," I said. "I've heard that the younger they are, the better it is." "Well, in that case," I said, "I'll start tomorrow." With the help of my oldest sister, we started giving my pups their first lessons. She would hold their collars while I made trails with the hide for them to follow. I'd climb trees that leaned out over the river, jump out into the water, swim to the other side, and make trails up and down the bank. With a long pole and wire, I'd drag the hide on top of real fences, swing it through the air, and let it touch the ground 20 or 30 feet away. I did everything with that hide a coon would do, and probably a lot of things a coon couldn't do. It was a beautiful sight to see my pups work those trails. At first, they were awkward and didn't know what to do, but they would never quit trying. Old Dan would get so eager and excited he would overrun a trail. Where it twisted or turned, he would run straight on, bawling, up a storm. It'd take him long to realize that a smart old coon didn't always run in a straight line. Little Ann never overran a trail. She would wriggle and twist and cry and whine, and pretty soon she would figure it out. At first, they were afraid of water. I never would admit it even to myself. I always said that they just didn't like to get wet. They would follow the trail to the stream and stop. Sitting down in their rears, they would cry and beg for help. With a pup under each arm, I'd wade out into the stream and set them down in the cool water. 9 times out of 10, one pup would swim one way and the other would go just the opposite way. I had a time with this part of their training, but my persistence had no bounds. It wasn't long until they loved the water. Old Dan would jump as far out as he could and practically knock the river dry. Little Ann would ease herself in, swim like a muskrat for the opposite shore. I taught my dogs every trick I knew and my new ones I heard about. I taught them how to split up on a riverbank to search for the hidden trail, because it was impossible to tell where a coon would come out of the water. Sometimes he might swim downstream and other times he might swim upstream. Maybe he would come back to the bank he had just left, or he would cross over to the other side. Perhaps he would stop in the middle of the stream on an old drift. Sometimes he would come out of the water by catching the dangling limbs of a leaning birch and climbing up, never touching the bank. Or he could come out on the same trail he used to go in, and backtrack. He would sometimes crawl up under an undermined bank or into an old muskrat den. One of the favorite tricks of a smart old ringtail is the tree barking trick. This he accomplished by running far up on the side of a tree and using his stout legs for leverage, sprinting 20 or 30 feet away before touching the ground. Dumb hounds trail up to the tree and start bawling treed. I taught my dogs to circle for a good 100 yards to be sure he was still in the tree before bawling. In order to learn more about coon hunting, I hang around my grandfather's store and listen to the stories told by the coon hunters. Some of the tales I heard were long and tall, but I believed them all. I could always tell when my grandpa was kidding me by the twinkle in his eye. He told me how a coon could climb right up the fog and disappear in the stars, how he could leap on a horse's back and run him over your dogs. I didn't care, for I loved to hear the tall tales. Anything that had a coon hair in it, I believed completely. All through that summer and into the late fall, the training went on. Although I was worn down to a frazzle, I was a happy boy. I figured I was ready for the ringtails. They one evening, tired and exhausted, I sat down by a big sycamore and called my dogs to me. It's all over, I said. There'll be no more lessons. I worked hard and I've done my best. From now on, it's all up to you. Hunting season is just a few days away and I'm going to let you rest, for I want you to be in good shape the night it opens. It was wonderful indeed how I could have heart-to-heart talks with my dogs, and they always seemed to understand. Each question I asked was answered in their own doggish way. Although they couldn't talk on my terms, they had a language of their own that was easy to understand. Sometimes I would see the answer in their eyes, and again, it would be in the friendly wagging of their tails. Other times I could hear the answer in a low whine or feel it in the soft caress of a warm, flicking tongue. In some way, they would always answer. Oof. Alright, this is going to be a long video, and I am getting tired, so I think I will sleep after. But I would like to stick to 2 chapters. So chapter 8 is going to start here. The day hunting season opened, I was as nervous as Sammy, our house cat. Part of that seemingly endless day was spent getting things ready for the coming night. I cleaned my lantern and filled it full of oil. With hog lard, I greased my boots until they were as soft as a hummingbird's nest. I was grinding my axe when Papa came around. Sorry. He smiled as he said, "This is the big night, isn't it?" "It sure is, Papa," I said, "and I've waited a long time for it." "Yes, I know," he said. "I've been thinking. There's not too much to do around here during the hunting season. I'm pretty sure I can take care of things, so you just go ahead and hunt all you want to." "Thanks, Papa," I said. "I guess I'll be out pretty late at night. I'll probably have to do a lot of sleeping in the daytime." Papa started frowning. "You know," he said, "your mother doesn't like this hunting of yours very much. She's worried about you being out all by yourself." "I can't see why Mama has to worry," I said. "Haven't I been roaming the woods ever since I was big enough to walk?" and I'm almost 14 now. I know, said Papa. It's all right with me, but women are a little different than men. They worry more. Now, just to be on the safe side, I think it would be a good idea for you to tell us where you'll be hunting. Then if anything happens, we'll know where to look. I told him I would, but I didn't think anything was going to happen. After Papa had left, I started thinking. He doesn't even talk to me like I was a boy anymore. He talks to me like I was a man. These wonderful thoughts made me feel just about as big as our old red mule. I had a good talk with my dogs. I've waited almost 3 years for this night, I said, and it hasn't been easy. I've taught you everything I know, and I want you to do your best. Little Anne acted like she understood. She whined and saved me a wash job on my face. Old Dan may have, but he didn't act like it. He just lay there in the sunshine, all stretched out and limber as a rag. During supper, Mama asked me where I was going to hunt. I'm not going far, I said, just down on the river. I could tell Mama was worried, and it didn't make me feel too good. Billy, she said, I don't approve of this hunting, but it looks like I can't say no. Not after all you've been through, getting your dogs and all that training. He'll be all right, Papa said. Besides, he's getting to be a good-sized man now. Man, Mama exclaimed. Why, he's still just a little boy. You can't keep him a little boy always, Papa said. He's got to grow up someday. I know, Mama said, but I don't like it. Not at all. And I can't help worrying. Mama, please don't worry about me, I said. I'll be all right. Well, I've been all over these hills. You know that. I know, she said. But that was in the daytime. I never worried too much when it was daylight, but at night it's different. It'll be dark and anything could happen. There won't be anything happen, I said. I promise I'll be careful. Mama got up from the table saying, Well, it's like I said. I can't say no and I can't help worrying. I'll pray every night you're out. The way Mama had me feeling, I didn't know whether to go hunting or not. Papa must have sensed how I felt. It's dark now, he said. I understand those coons start stirring pretty early. You had better be going, hadn't you? While Mama was bundling me up, Papa lit my lantern. He handed it to me, saying, I'd like to see a big coonskin on the smokehouse wall in the morning. The whole family followed me out on the porch. There we all got a surprise. My dogs were sitting on the steps waiting for me. I heard Papa laugh. Why, they know you're going hunting, he said. Know it as well as anything. Well, I never, said Mama. Do you really think they do? It does look like they do. Why, just look at them. Little Ann started wiggling and twisting. Old Dan trotted out to the gate, stopped, turned around, and looked at me. Sure they know. Billy's going hunting, piped the little one, and I know why. How do you know so much, silly? Asked the oldest one. Because I told little Ann, that's why, she said. And she told old Dan. That's how they know. We all had to laugh at her. The last thing I heard as I left the house was the voice of my mother. Be careful, Billy, she said, and don't stay out late. It was a beautiful night, still and frosty. A big grinning Ozark moon had the countryside bathed in a soft yellow glow. The starlit heaven reminded me of a large blue umbrella, outspread and with a handle broken off. Just before I reached the timber, I called my dogs to me. Now the trail will be a little different tonight, I whispered. It won't be a high dragged on the ground. It'll be the real thing. So remember everything I taught you, and I'm depending on you. Just put one up a tree, and I'll do the rest. I turned them loose, saying, Go get 'em. They streaked for the timber. By the time I had reached the river, every nerve in my body was drawn up as tight as a fiddle string. Big-eyed and with ears open, I walked on, stopping now and then to listen. The way I was slipping along, anyone would have thought I was trying to slip up on my coon myself. I'd never seen a night so peaceful and still. All around me, tall sycamores gleamed like white streamers in the moonlight. A prowling skunk came wobbling up on the riverbank. He stopped when he saw me. I smiled at the foxfire glow of his small, beady red eyes. He turned and disappeared in the underbrush. I heard a sharp snap and a feathery rustle in some brush close by. A small rodent started squealing in agony. A nighthawk had found his supper. Across the river and from far back in the rugged mountains, I heard the baying of a hound. I wondered if it was the same one I had heard from my window on those nights so long ago. Although my eyes were seeing the wonders of the night, my ears were ever alert, listening for the sound of my hounds telling me they had found a trail. I was expecting one of them to bawl, but when it came, it startled me. The deep tones of old Dan's voice jarred the silence around me. I dropped my axe and almost dropped my lantern. A strange feeling came over me. I took a deep breath and threw back my head to give the call of the hunter, but something went wrong. My throat felt like it had been tied in a knot. I swallowed a couple of times and the knot disappeared. As loud as I could, I whooped, "Woo-wee! Get him, Dan! Get him!" Little Anne came in. The bell-like tones of her voice made shivers run up and down my spine. I whooped to her, "Woo-wee! Tell it to him, little girl. Tell it to him." This was what I had prayed for, worked and sweated for. My own little hound bawling on the trail of a river coon. I don't know why I cried, but I did. While the tears rolled, I whooped again and again. They straightened the trail out and headed downriver. I took off after them as fast as I could run. A mile downstream, the coon pulled off his first trick. I could tell by my dogs' voices that they had lost the trail. When I came to them, they were out in an old drift sniffing around. The coon had pulled a simple trick. He had run out on the drift, leaped into the water, and crossed the river. To an experienced coonhound, the crew trick would have been nothing at all. My dogs were just big, awkward pups trailing their first live coon. I stood and watched, wondering if they would remember the training I had given them. Now and then I would whoop, urging them on. Old Dan was having a fit. He whined and he bawled. He whimpered and he cried. He came to me and reared up, begging for help. "I'm not going to help you," I scolded, "and you're not going to find him out in that drift. If you would just remember some of the training I gave you, you could find the trail. Now go find that coon." He ran back out in the drift and started searching. Little Anne came to me. I could see the pleading in her warm gray eyes. "I'm ashamed of you, little girl," I said. "I thought you had more sense than this. If you let him fool you this easily, you'll never be a coon dog." She whined, turned, and trotted downstream to search again for the lost trail. I couldn't understand. Had all the training I had given them been useless? I knew if I had waded the river, they would follow me. Once on the other side, it would be easy for them to find the trail. I didn't want it that way. I wanted them to figure it out by themselves. The more I thought about it, the more disgusted I became. I sat down and buried my face in my arms. Out on the drift, old Dan started whining. It made me angry, and I got up to scold him again. I couldn't understand his actions. He was running along the edge of the drift, whimpering and staring downriver. I looked that way. I could see something swimming for the opposite shore. At first I thought it was a muskrat in the middle of the stream, where the moonlight was the brightest. I got a good look. It was little Anne. With a loud whoop, I told her how proud I was. My little girl had remembered her training. She came out on a gravel bar, shook the water from her body, and disappeared in the thick timber. Minutes later, she let me know she had found the trail. Before the tones of her voice had died away, old Dan plowed into the water. He was so eager to join her, I could hear him whining as he swam. As soon as his feet touched the bottom in the shallows, he started bawling and lunging. White sheets of water, knocked high in the moonlight by his churning feet, gleamed like thousands of tiny white stars. He came out of the river onto a sandbar. In his eagerness, his feet slipped in the loose sand, and down he went. He came out of his roll, running and bawling. Ahead of him was a log jam. He sailed over and disappeared down the riverbank. Seconds later, I heard his deep voice blend with the sharp cries of little Anne. At that moment, no boy in the world could have been more proud of his dogs than I was. Never again would I doubt them. I was hurrying along, looking for a shallow riffle so I could wade across when the voices of my dogs stopped. I waited and listened. They opened again on my side of the stream. The coon had crossed back over. I couldn't help smiling. I knew that never again would a ringtail fool them by swimming the river. The next trick the old fellow pulled was dandy. He climbed a large water oak standing about 10 feet from the river and simply disappeared. I got there in time to see my dogs swimming for the opposite shore. For half an hour they worked that bank, not finding the trail. They swam back. I stood and watched them. They practically tore the riverbank to pieces looking for the trail. Old Dan knew the coon had climbed the water oak. He went back, reared up on it, and bawled a few times. There's no use in doing that, boy," I said. "I know he climbed it, but he's not there now. Maybe it's like Grandpa said, he just climbed right on out through the top and disappeared in the stars." My dogs didn't know it, but I was pretty well convinced that that was what the coon had done. They wouldn't give up. Once again they crossed over to the other shore. It was no use. The coon hadn't touched that bank. They came back. Old Dan went up the river and little Anne worked downstream. An hour and a half later they gave up and came to me begging for help. I knelt down between their wet bodies while I scratched and petted them. I let them know that I still loved them. "I'm not mad," I said. "I know you did your best. If that coon can fool both of us, then we're just beat. We'll go someplace else to hunt. He's not the only one. He's not the only one coon. He's not the only coon in these bottoms." Just as I picked up my axe and lantern, little Anne let out a bawl and tore out down the riverbank. Old Dan, with a bewildered look on his face, stood for a moment looking after her. Then, raising his head high in the air, he made out Mary Jones' ring with his deep voice. I could hear the underbrush popping as he ran to join her. I couldn't figure out what had taken place. Surely little Anne had heard something or seen something. I could tell by their voices that whatever it was they were after, they were close enough to see it, were probably running by sight. The animal left the bottoms and headed for the mountains. Whatever it was, it must have realized my dogs were crowding it too closely. At the edge of the foothills, it turned and came back toward the river. I was still trying to figure out what was going on when I realized that in striking the river, the animal had again turned and was coming straight toward me. I set my lantern down and tightened my grip on the axe. I was standing my ground quite well when visions of bears, lions, and all kinds of other animals started flashing across my mind. I jumped behind a big sycamore and was trying hard to press my body into the tree when a big coon came tearing by. 25 yards behind him came my dogs, running side by side. I saw them clearly when they passed me, bawling every time their feet touched the ground. After seeing that there was nothing to be scared of, once again I was the fearless hunter, screaming and yelling as loud as I could. Get him, boy! Get him! I tore out after them. The trails I knew so well were forgotten. I took off straight through the underbrush. I was turning my way through some alders when the voices of my dogs stopped. Holding my breath, I stood still and waited. Then it came, the long, drawn-out bawl of the tree bark. My little hounds had done it. They had treed their first coon. When I came to them and saw what they had done, I was speechless. I groaned and closed my eyes. I didn't want to believe it. There were a lot of big sycamores in the bottoms, but the one in which my dogs had treed was the giant of them all. While prowling in the woods, I had seen the big tree many times. I'd always stopped and admired it. Like a king in his own domain, it towered far above the smaller trees. It had taken me quite a while to find a name suitable for the big sycamore. For a while, I had called it the chicken tree. In some ways, it had reminded me of a mother hen hovering over her young in a rainstorm. Its huge limbs spread out over the small birch, ash, box elder, and water oaks, as if it were alone with their protector. Next, I named it the giant. That name didn't last long. Mama told us a children's story about a big giant that lived in the mountains and ate little children that were lost. Right away, I started looking for another name. One day, while lying in the warm sun, staring at its magnificent beauty, I found the perfect name. From that day on, it was called the Big Tree. I named the bottoms around it the Big Tree Bottoms. Walking around and using the moon as the light, I started looking for the coon. High up in the top, I saw a hollow end and the end of a broken limb. I figured that was the coon's den. I could climb almost any tree I'd ever seen, but I knew I could never climb the big sycamore. It would take days to chop it down. There had been very little hope from the beginning, but on seeing that hollow, I gave up. Come on, I said to my dogs. There's nothing I can do. We'll go someplace else and find another coon. I turned to walk away. My hounds made no move to follow. They started whining. Old Dan reared up, placed his front paws on the trunk, and started bawling. I know he's there, I said. There's nothing I can do. I can't climb it. Why, it's 60 feet up to the first limb, and it would take me a month to cut it down. Again, I turned and started on my way. Little Anne came to me. She reared up and started licking my hands. Swallowing the knot in my throat, I said, I'm sorry, little girl. I want him just as badly as you do, but there's no way I can get him. She ran back to the tree and started digging in the soft ground close to the roots. Come on now, I said in a gruff voice. You're both acting silly. You know I'd get the coon for you if I could, but I can't. With a whipped dog look on her face and with her tail between her legs, little Anne came over. She wouldn't even look at me. Old Dan walked slowly around behind the tree and hid himself. He peeped around the big trunk and looked at me. The message I read in his friendly eyes tore at my heart. He seemed to be saying, You told us to put one in a tree and you would do the rest. With tears in my eyes, I looked again at the big sycamore. A wave of anger came over me. Gritting my teeth, I said, I don't care how big you are, I'm not going to let my dogs down. I told them if they put a coon in a tree, I would do the rest, and I'm going to. I'm going to cut you down. I don't care if it takes me a whole year. I walked over and sank my axe as deep as I could in the smooth white bark. My dogs threw a fit. Little Anne started turning in circles. I could hear her pleased, whimpering cry. Old Dan bawled and started gnawing on the big tree's trunk. At first it was easy. My axe was sharp and the chips flew. 2 hours later, things were different. My arms felt like two dead grapevines, and my back felt like someone had pulled a plug out of one end of it and drained all the sap out. While taking a breather, I saw I was making more progress than I thought I would. The cut I had started was a foot deep, but I still had a long way to go. Sitting on their rears, my dogs waited and watched. I smiled at the looks on their faces. Every time I stopped chopping, they would come over, with little Ann washing the sweat from my face. Old Dan would inspect my work. He seemed to be pleased with what he saw, for he always wagged his tail. Along about daylight, I got my second wind, and I really did make the chips fly. This burst of energy cost me dearly. By sunup, I was so stiff I could hardly move. My hands and arms were numb. My back screamed with pain. I could go no further. Sitting down, I leaned back against the big tree and fell asleep. Little Ann woke me up by washing my face. I groaned with the torture of getting to my feet. Every muscle in my body seemed to be tied in a knot. I was thinking of going down to the river to wash my face in the cool water when I heard a loud whoop. I recognized my father's voice. I whooped to let him know where I was. Papa was riding our red mule. After he rode up, he just sat there and looked at me over. He glanced at my dog and at the big sycamore. I saw the worry leave his face. He straightened his shoulders, pursed his lips, and blew out a little air. He reminded me of someone who had just dropped a heavy load. In a slow, calm voice, he asked, "Are you all right, Billy?" "Yes, Papa," I said. "Oh, I'm a little tired and sleepy. Otherwise, I'm fine." He slid from the mule's back and came over. "Your mother's worried," he said. "When you didn't come in, we didn't know what had happened. You should have come home." I didn't know what to say. I bowed my head and looked at the ground. I was trying hard to choke back the tears when I felt his hand on my shoulder. "I'm not scolding," he said. "We just thought maybe you had an accident or something." I looked up and saw a smile on his face. He turned and looked again at the tree. "Say," he said, "this is the sycamore you call the big tree, isn't it?" I nodded my head. "Is there a coon in it?" he asked. "There sure is, Papa," I said. "He's in that hollow limb. See that one way up there? That's why I couldn't come home. I was afraid he'd get away." "Maybe you just think he's there," Papa said. "I believe I'd make sure before I'd cut down a tree that big." "Oh, he's there all right," I said. "My dogs weren't 10 feet behind him when he went up it." "Why are you so determined to get this coon?" Papa asked. "Couldn't you go somewhere else, a tree one? Maybe the tree would be a smaller one?" "I thought about that, Papa," I said, "but I made a bargain with my dogs. I told them if they would put one in a tree, I'd do the rest. Well, they fulfilled their part of the bargain. Now it's up to me to do my part, and I'm going to, Papa. I'm going to cut it down. I don't care if it takes me a year." Papa laughed and said, "Oh, I don't think it'll take that long. It will take a while. I tell you what I'll do. You take the mule and go get some breakfast. I'll chop on it until you get back." "No, Papa," I said. "I don't want any help. I want to cut it down all by myself. You see, if someone helps me, I wouldn't feel like I kept my part of the agreement." An astonished look came over my father's face. "Why, Billy," he said, "you can't stay down here without anything to eat and no sleep. Besides, it'll take at least 2 days to cut that tree down, and that's hard work. Please, Papa, I beg, don't make me quit. I just have to get that coon. If I don't, my dogs won't ever believe in me again." Papa didn't know what to tell me. He scratched his head, looked over to my dogs and back at me. He started walking around. I waited for him to make up his mind. He finally reached a decision. "Well, all right," he said. "If that's the way you want it, I'm for it, even if it is only an agreement between you and your dogs. If a man's word isn't any good, he's no good himself. Now I have to get back and tell your mother that you're all right. It's a cinch that you can't do that kind of work on an empty stomach, so I'll send your older sister down with a lunch bucket." With tears in my eyes, I said, "Tell Mama I'm sorry for not coming home last night." "Don't you worry about your mother," he said as he climbed on the mule's back. "I'll take care of her. Another thing, I have to make a trip to the store today, and I'll talk this over with your grandfather. He may be able to help some way." After Papa left, things were a little different. The tree didn't look as big, and my axe wasn't as heavy. I even managed to sing a little as I chopped away. When my sister came with the lunch bucket, I could have kissed her, but I didn't. She took one look at the big tree, and her blue eyes got as big as a guinea pig's. "You're crazy," she gasped. "Absolutely crazy. Why, it'll take a month to cut that tree down. And all for an old coon?" I was so busy with the fresh side pork, fried eggs, and hot biscuits, I didn't pay much attention to her. After all, she was a girl, and girls don't think like boys do. She waved down. "You can't possibly cut it down today. What are you going to do with it when it gets dark?" "I'm going to keep right on chopping," I said. "I stayed with it last night, didn't I? Well, I'll stay till it's cut down. I don't care how long it takes." My sister got upset. She looked at me, threw back her small head, and looked up to the top of the big sycamore. "You're as crazy as a bedbug," she said. "Why, I never heard of such a thing." She stepped over in front of me and very seriously asked if she could look in my eyes. "Look in my eyes," I said. "What do you want to do that for?" "I'm not sick." Yes, you are, Billy, she said. Very sick. Mama said when old man Johnson went crazy, his eyes turned green. I want to see if yours have. This was too much. If you don't get out of here, I shouted, you're going to be red instead of green. I mean that. I grabbed up a stick and started toward her. Of course, I wouldn't have hit her for anything. This scared her and she started for the house. I heard her saying something about an old coon as she disappeared in the underbrush. Down in the bottom of my lunch bucket, I found a neat little package of scraps for my dogs. While they were eating, I walked down to a spring and filled the bucket with cool water. The food did wonders for me. My strength came back. I spit on my hands and whistled a hunter's tune. I started making the chips fly. The cut grew so big I could have laid down in it. I moved over to another side and started a new one. Once, while I was taking a rest, old Dan came over to inspect my work. He hopped up in the cut and stiffed around. You had better get out of there, I said. If that tree takes a notion to fall, it'll mash you flatter than a tadpole's tail. With a no-care look on his friendly face, he gave me a hurry-up signal with a wag of his tail. Little Anne had dug a bed in a pile of dead leaves. She looked as if she were asleep, but I knew she wasn't. Every time I stopped swinging the axe, she would raise her head and look at me. Alright, it's the end of chapter 7, and I am actually tired, so I will be going to bed. I love you, babe. I really hope you're doing well, and that this video sees you well. I can't wait to see. Bye.